Welcome in, everyone. I'm your Vegas Nation host, Cassie Soto. The Raiders' free agency moves continue. This time, the team is parting ways with a key player. The Raiders are trading star tight end Darren Waller to the New York Giants in exchange for a third-round pick. For more on this news, let's go ahead and bring in Raiders beat writer for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Vinny Bonsignore. Vinny, a few hours before the Waller's news, it was announced that the Raiders were picking up wide receiver Jacoby Myers from the Patriots. And if you kind of put two and two together, you see a wide receiver coming to this team. So you maybe had to think that, okay, someone on this roster has to be let go. I just don't think many people expected that person to be Darren Waller.
Yeah, and these aren't easy decisions by any stretch of the imagination. Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels were brought in here, though, to make some hard decisions and make some hard evaluations and try to build a football team, a better football team, a more complete football team, balanced football team, also with an eye on the future. When you look at and there's no doubt, and you're very astute in your observation, the Jacoby Myers move definitely is tied in an indirect way, if not a direct way, to the Darren Waller move. If they don't bring in Jacoby Myers, I don't think this trade happens, or somebody like that. So basically he replaces, Jacoby does, the production of Darren Waller. They'll bring in another tight end. It's not like he's going to play tight end. I'm just talking strictly from a production standpoint and a salary standpoint. Those two players now kind of X each other out. The key is, from the Raiders' perspective, number one, you're bringing in a 27-year-old in Jacoby Myers, who's now under control for the next 3 years. You're trading away a 31-year-old in Darren Waller, who realistically was only going to be here one more year anyway. I know everyone's saying, well, he was under contract for a couple more years after that. Those were just years that weren't very likely that he was going to play under the conditions of that deal. So realistically, the Raiders had Darren Waller one more year. And then on top of all that, when you throw in the draft pick that the Raiders got, a third-round pick from the New York Giants, that becomes a player that is now under control for 4 more years. So they gave up 1 year of control in Waller, a 31-year-old who's had trouble, let's be honest, staying on the field the last couple of years, for somebody in Jacoby Myers, 27 years old, and a soon-to-be rookie third-round pick.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that third-round pick, Vinny. Again, the Raiders receiving that in compensation for the Darren Waller trade. Do you think that that's enough, a third-rounder for Waller? Granted, injuries have plagued him, as you mentioned, and we haven't seen as much production from him, especially these last 2 seasons. But anytime he steps on the field, he still has the very real possibility of being a big threat.
Yeah, it's the only viable offer that the Raiders got. I could definitely report that. And from the rest of the NFL's perspective, for the same reasons the Raiders were okay with moving on for him, are the same reasons why there really wasn't a big market for him, if any, outside of the Giants. You're talking about a 31-year-old, soon to be 32-year-old tight end who has missed a lot of games over the last two years, and who's really under control. I mean, at a number that's going to be cool with the team for really one more season. So I would imagine if he stays with the Giants, they'll renegotiate that deal after this year and see if they can, rework the numbers a little bit. But for those reasons that we were just talking about, there wasn't a huge market out there for Darren Waller. I know that might shock some people, but you have to look at the year that he's coming off, and really the last year and almost, up until or through November 28th. Or Thanksgiving of the 2021 season, when he hurt his knee. Ever since then, he's had a hard time getting on the field and being productive.
Well, I know fans weren't happy. Of course, you mentioned it. They were maybe surprised by this trade. But it was interesting that some of Waller's now former teammates also took to social media. Josh Jacobs, Jermaine Illuminor, just some of those players. I'm wondering, what do you think is the temperature of the room right now? We always say this is a business. This is a business at the end of the day. But for maybe a guy like Davante Adams, who wanted to come to the Raiders to be competitive, to be on a competitive team, what do you think they're all feeling right now as these moves are being made? Of course, Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler are doing what's in the best interest for the Raiders, but these are some, big plays, big trades being made here.
Yeah, well, fortunately for the Raiders, they don't have a game to play on Sunday. there's a long time until mini camp and all that and training camp. I would think that by the time, I'm sure guys are emotional right now. They just lost a pretty good friend. But from a practicality standpoint, from a production standpoint, let's just talk about last year. And I know that there were plenty of more good years for Darren Waller, but he only played in 9 games last year. I think he had 28 catches for just over 200 yards or so. So from a Devontae Adams perspective, and I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but if I were him and I'm looking at, I'm losing a friend in Darren Waller, but the production really wasn't there. He didn't play much with Darren Waller, let's be honest. And if Jacoby Myers comes in and the Raiders will bring in another tight end, if not bring back a Foster Moreau, and they still have Josh Jacobs and Hunter Renfrow. I mean, it's kind of what Darren was used to anyway, based off of last year. And here's the thing about it. The Raiders now have 12 draft picks in this upcoming draft next April. They also have now 4 picks in the top 100 picks. That's some pretty good arsenal to really attack what the Raiders need defensively and along the offensive line. They're going to have a bunch of picks to really be able to address some needs. Now, it's obviously on Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels to maximize those picks. We won't know, until training camp and the games start, whether or not they did that. But this gives them a real opportunity. And just one more thing to go back to the offense. Obviously Darren Waller has been a fan favorite, and when he's healthy, has been a productive player. I think the Raiders took last year to kind of really assess things and, what's working, what's not working, what needs to be improved, how can you tinker with it to make it a little bit more efficient and reliable in terms of the injuries. And 2 of the things that they kind of came up with was they can live in a world without Darren Waller and without Derek Carr and maybe be better off for it. It remains to be seen if they will. But that was one of the determinations that they made. And that's why Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels have these jobs in the first place. They have to make hard decisions that could be emotional, no doubt about it. But they have to look at it from a practical and rational way.
Yeah, some big moves already made and lots to be made. Vinny, thank you so much as always. Really appreciate you.
All right. Thank you, Cassie.
Once again, the Raiders are trading tight end Darren Waller to the New York Giants in exchange for a 3rd-round pick. And as Vinny said, the Raiders are now up to 12 picks in this year's NFL Draft. For all of your Raiders news, you can head on over to VegasNation.com. For the Las Vegas Review Journal, I'm Cassie Soto.